This conference will now be recorded.
We have 6 panelists, Deka Danso from the Urban Jobs Task Force, Lanessa, Chaplin, the Assistant Director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, Greg Lowe, Chief Policy Officer for the City of Syracuse, Sharon Owens, Deputy Mayor, City of Syracuse, Jonathan Link Logan of the Northside Up, and Bob Haley, architect. I'm not going to say much more about them, but I'm really looking forward to hear their perspective, each of these perspectives on the important DEIS for the I-81 project. So I'm going to start by asking Greg Lowe to open up his mic and give us your ideas on this.
Happy Green Bag Lunch, everybody. It's great to be with you all, and it is really exciting, actually. It's particularly fun also to see so many faces on the call who have been regular supporters, contributors, and partners to the city as it has expressed its support for the community grid, and as Mayor Walsh has for about three years or so now has convened a group called the 81 Cooperative that gathered just about monthly for the past 3 years with several of the folks on here to talk about how we can advance the prospects of the community grid. So now it's both exciting and really kind of daunting actually to be here because there's a lot to be done in a short window of time. But we're on a good path. And what I thought I wanted to share with everybody quickly today, because I know there is interest and curiosity, is what's the city doing right now as such a critical stakeholder to this project? Not the only critical stakeholder, but a critical stakeholder to this project. So I do want you to know that Mayor Walsh, at the start of this year, convened first 5 working groups that have been working on a monthly basis with DOT in advance of the release of the DEIS to begin planning for construction and other impacts. So there's been 5 teams working, everybody. There's been a public safety team, a transportation team, a public information team, an engineering team, and an infrastructure team, and a planning and design team. City department heads meeting regularly with the senior staff at DOT to be hashing out those issues that are coming at us with this project, no matter what happens. With the release of the DEIS, the mayor has convened a team of city department heads and key staff. And remember, we have many stakeholders inside city government who care about this project, from our parks commissioner to the commissioner of water to the city engineer. And all of those individuals, probably in excess of 25 people, including our public safety functions, police and fire, are now working day in and day out. We have our next team meeting today, I think at 4:15. Nobody's going home this week without delivering their homework on our written response to the DEIS. It is well underway, and again, the time frame's a little daunting, but we're getting there. My last comment is to say that this is a community endeavor. And so while the city is working on its written response, and we are responsible for what we deliver for the city, I welcome input. We welcome. The mayor wants to hear from you. So I'm going to put in the chat my email address. Simple way for you to reach me and know that what you send me will be put in front of our team working in city government and be considered as part of our written response. So I'm going to turn it next, John. I'm going to save you some introduction time if you want. I'm going to turn it to Jonathan Link Logan, who I think is next from Northside Up.
Sorry about that. Thanks for the introduction, Greg, and thanks, Jeff, for your kind words. Hopefully I can live up to them. My name is Jonathan Link Logan, and I am the director of Northside Up, which is a program of Center State CEO working on Northside revitalization efforts here in the city. I've been involved with this project for probably just about as long as many of the folks on this panel for looking at it from a Northside perspective. And so I thought today I'd share a little bit about some of the things that we've been working on with our community residents and stakeholders, as well as businesses here on the north side to help move this project along in a direction that we feel is going to be most beneficial for our neighborhood. One of the things that we did was also form a group that was involving residents and stakeholders from Franklin Square so that we were collectively looking at issues related to the highway north of 690. And so when the draft environmental impact statement came out, or the preliminary draft environmental impact statement came out in 2019, we worked to provide comments at that point and have been looking through the newest draft to see what has been addressed and what's changed positively, or maybe what didn't get addressed. And so some of the things that, globally speaking, our organization, our group has been concerned about is making sure that the project does as much as it can to promote and enhance connections between the north side of Franklin Square and neighboring downtown and other neighborhoods. We also wanted to make sure that the project was looking critically at preserving the historic buildings, particularly those along the North Salina Street corridor, where our major business community is located on the north side, because that's really a foundational element to a lot of the work that we've been doing to help revitalize the neighborhood. And then we were also concerned that we didn't want to see the project repeat mistakes of the past. So we wanted to make sure that the project was looking at things more holistically than just the cars. And so trying to ensure that all modes of transportation are accounted for and adequately presented and provided for in the project. We have a lot of folks in our neighborhood who don't have cars and get around via bus or walking or bicycles, so making sure that those amenities are also provided for was important. And then we were also wanting to make sure that the project didn't do things to increase the dead zones that happen, that we're all familiar with parking lots or vacant and dilapidated buildings along the highway. As it relates to this latest draft that's come out, some of the things that we were concerned about were looking at the bridges that would be rebuilt as part of the community grid over 81, and looking to see how they are being addressed as far as creating those connections to neighboring communities, as well as making sure that they provide a pedestrian and bicycle friendly way to do that. It looks like DOT has made some accommodations for that, but without getting into the details of it, as far as I think all of us would like to at this point, it's really unclear exactly how far they've pushed that. One of the other things that we were interested in making sure was considered was that DOT, when we originally were looking at this project, was proposing for a new lane, both southbound and northbound, so having 4 lanes of highway through the north side as opposed to the 3 in each direction that are currently there. And when they released the preliminary draft environmental impact statement, they had removed the southbound lane, but they still had the northbound lane between the Pearl Street on-ramp and Hiawatha Boulevard provided. And it looks like that's still in here now. So one of the questions that we would like to ask DOT is to get a little bit more information as to why that's necessary, and they haven't considered and if they've considered other ways to reduce the demand on that highway to perhaps not need to build that additional lane. And then the last thing that I'll address right now is that we've been looking pretty closely at the project from the perspective of what impacts it would have for the new interchanges at Krause and Irving. This is a pretty important component of making the community grid work to disperse traffic across the city street network. And it's something that is important for making the project work properly, but we don't want to see that come at the cost of impacts on the neighboring residents and businesses of the north side, particularly in Holly Green. And so we would like to be spending more time with DOT to get to understand what they are doing as far as it relates to reducing the impacts of those cars coming off in that neighborhood, which they currently don't do in those locations, because those will be new exits and entrances to the highway, and making sure, as I mentioned, also around creating those connections between neighborhoods, that the pedestrian and bicycle amenities there are done in a way that is intentional in increasing access and making it so that it's safe and inviting for folks to move between the north side and the east side of the community, because we do know that a number of graduate students and students live in that neighborhood. So those folks traveling to and from the Hill, particularly those that rely on bike or ped access, that's something that we would want to make sure that we're pushing DOT to do as well as possible. So I'm going to stop at that point, because I think that the kind of the questions and answer piece at the end is really important. So I'll let who's ever next, which, John, I don't know who that is, so I'm sorry I can't do what Greg did.
John, you have to unmute yourself.
I knew that would be a problem when I muted myself. I'm sorry. I'm going to just continue down the list, and Bob Haley is the next person on the on our list here. So Bob, unmute yourself.
Yep, thank you. I just did, but I wanted to just ask, I wanted to do cleanups, simply not to repeat, since I've spoken before to the group. Might Deka want to go ahead here with the leadoff that was anticipated, or I can go ahead if you wish.
Bob, why don't you just go ahead and tell us what your concerns are? I think the order that I'm planning now will bring us to Sharon with the final initial round. Yeah, why don't you go ahead? I think it's important that you gave us a presentation a month or two ago, and we appreciate that, and your perspective is always welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank this entire group. As Greg has said, and as many of us know, so many people have been working on this for so long. And anyhow, thank you. As a quick introduction to some of you, I'm an architect and a planner, have worked in the city for 45 years and assisted both city and county planning efforts over that entire period of time. The AIA is my I'm representing them, but today I'm really proud to represent my learning experience through this project with Moving People Transportation Coalition, understanding Jonathan Link Northside group. We've gotten together many times over these years. So where are we right now in this project, which is what today's about? I went again this morning and tried to figure out some new terminology in the new draft DEIS. And one was the DDR DEIS. And I said, gee, I haven't seen DDR in the front of these documents before. What is it? Well, it's the design, what is it? The draft design report / draft environmental impact statement. That's the current document that's just been released to us. It is quoted titled draft in 2 of those titles. I want us all to remember that. This is a process of engagement, and I consider it a draft. Like in architecture and design, you keep going on the problems you need to solve as long as you can to make the best possible design you can. And I think that's the way we can all work together best to assist the talented people at DOT who are doing things they've never done before. They don't take down viaducts usually. New York State, this team and this consulting team has done a tremendous effort to try and deal with this huge past impact on our city. So let me just go ahead with what we can do. It's very important for all the citizens to make a comment. It's very important to hear from each of you, and write in your comments is best. The DOT's website's available. You can write in a 1-line sentence, you want this street fixed, or you can write in a bigger sentence if there's other things. You need to do that before September the 14th. Please make your concerns known. Like I said, writing. This is the public. We need to support the community grid. Everybody should start their letter by "We support the community grid" option. It's critical that you make it very clear if that is your point of view. Pedestrian. So what are the other concerns? Here are my personal concerns that I think are prioritized. One of them is that the DOT has solved the entire Gateway project. I'm sorry, the entire community grid project, and it's about 35 miles in totality. 90% of that is the highway, high speed, big truck loads, all of the intersections, all of the reconstruction needed. 10% is critical through the downtown and residential neighborhoods of our city. That 10% is what we live in, we work in, we play in. It's what Jonathan just spoke to. It's where most of us live and most of us additionally work. That area is not anywhere near as good as it can be. This is where the subtleties of the urban design can be brought forward. The DOT needs to know these details. They have design people on their team to solve these problems. They've made advances in certain areas to solve that. So it's critical that we ask for pedestrian safety in residential neighborhoods. That can be better. Another large basic issue is the return of land to the city. This has been discussed from the first point of view. Let me not just say the city. Return to tax base, both city and county tax base potential development. This is the stuff we work within the city to make a city grow. The DOT, 60 years ago, took away a huge swath, not only buildings and businesses. Yes, my father's business, he was moved in the late 50s. But the issue is that it's taking away the material we live in the city as far as developable properties. We have that data. It'll be in our AIA report. We've submitted to the DOT about how that land, whether it's a sliver or a larger parcel, can be given or sold to be used for future tax-based development. And getting towards the end here, it's the entire issue that Deka and others have spent so much time, Twiggy and others, about the job labor force. It's critical and it's advancing. I'll let others speak to that here. I won't, because I'm not on those teams as much as others. But it's critical for the labor improvements, but we also look carefully at the DOT documents when they go out, contracting, and how we can deliver those intentions for education and training of our local labor force, but to get it in place on this project. We're 5, 6, 7 years ahead of when this is going to be needed. We can do this. It should be folded into not only our planning on the city side and our community side, but into the DOT contracting initiatives so we make it happen and don't miss opportunities there. Okay, what's sustainable? This is a sustainable forum. All of those issues I've just talked about are sustainable elements to the city of Syracuse. Future land growth, jobs, economic growth, quality of place. So you need to list your specific neighborhood issues, and you need to write to them, support the community grid. And I'll end it there and thank you all for what I've learned from all of you through this 15 to 20 year project now.
Thank you very much, Bob. Next on our panel will be Deka Danso of the Urban Jobs Task Force. I see she has joined us now. So don't forget to unmute.
Hi, thank you, John. Thank you to all. And sorry, I'm a little bit late. I'm going to be going based off a couple of slides, but I don't really need to share them per se. I could really just talk through them. So you're going to see me kind of looking at these slides rather than looking at you until I'm able to get all the information out. So hopefully that's okay. And I'll also try to be brief. So as John said, my name is Deka Danso. I'm president of the Urban Jobs Task Force. We are a local 501c4, and we advocate for equitable access to employment opportunities for residents in the city of Syracuse, especially minorities. And I also want to say, just throughout this, we started the I-81 campaign in 2017 around local jobs. Last year in 2020, we joined in coalition with NYCLU, just to really ramp up our efforts around racial, economic, and environmental justice on the project. So I say that to say the demands that they have, we have. The demands that we have, they have. So that's that. That's who the Urban Jobs Task Force is. So I just want to talk about the community opportunity that is I-81, right? The project, based on the DEIS, is going to require over 7.7 million work hours for several thousand individual workers. So the project, obviously, it has potential to provide access to practical hands-on experience with some federal construction employment for those who, you know, despite their capabilities, they usually don't receive such an opportunity. Additionally, it can provide entry into our local trade unions for them, you know, which would upscale our workforce and employ them for our regions present and future. So simply put, what the Urban Jobs Task Force is looking to get out of I-81 is a concrete benefit, which is pathways out of poverty. I should also note that according to the DEIS, most of I-81's construction and demolition phases will be done within city limits, making the benefits to city limits, this is both practical and it's the right thing to do, especially given all the harm that we know that the original I-81 caused. So the problem with that is, right, the problem with all these thousands of good paying jobs coming is that there's no guarantee that Syracuse workers are going to be able to benefit from those jobs. So we actually have to raise our voice and we have to let the DOT know through this comment period that we are fully expecting, we're expecting local hire to the maximum extent possible. So there's two kind of barriers there. One is the federal equal opportunity goals. So those were set in the 1970s, but they're not going to be updated before shovels are in the ground. As they stand, the DOT is really only required to set equal opportunity goals of 3.8% for racial minorities and 6.9% for women. We did not spend 4 years in the streets organizing everybody for us to get 3.8 and 6.9% goals, obviously. So we need to kind of ramp up our efforts to let the DOT know that's right, that's not satisfactory. We're expecting them to go far beyond what is required of them by the government. Second is the makeup of our local trade unions. So the Urban Jobs Task Force and Legal Services of CNY back in 2018, 2019 did the first ever racial equity impact statement, and that was a comprehensive study into the construction trades in our region. We found that 87% of the workers on construction projects in Syracuse were white. And even more troubling, over 90% of those workers did not live in the city of Syracuse. So that means if I-81 started tomorrow, a large majority of Syracuse residents are not going to work, right? So we have to demand that of the DOT. So how do we get to a solution? Well, luckily, we've had a major breakthrough. I think everybody knows Pete Buttigieg and staff and Schumer and Gillibrand were all in Syracuse in June to express their support at the federal level for local hire. They also were kind of harping on the fact that Biden's administration has reinstated something called SEP 14. That is a federal pilot program that allows the DOT to put in local hire work goals, right? So from the Urban Jobs Task Force standpoint, the SEP 14 application has to include the following. It has to include goals for city residents specifically, has to include goals for the surrounding suburbs. So we have a couple of our zip codes that are belong to the city as well as like an immediate surrounding suburb. So we think there needs to be a specific goal around that. We think there needs to be a specific goal around disadvantaged workers, right? And we also think there needs to be a specific goal around union apprenticeships. We also believe that the New York State DOT needs to fund on-the-job trainees for this project, which they absolutely could do. And finally, we think that there needs to be monitoring of those goals and public transparency through an independent compliance officer, right? So funding for that on-the-job training, actually starting an on-the-job training program, setting these goals through an equitable SEP 14 application, and monitoring of those goals and public transparency through an ICO. So those are a few things that we're hoping for. The SEP 14 application can actually implement all of those things except possibly the apprentice goals. And I will say that the DOT did announce when the feds came here that they were going to submit a SEP 14 application. And up to this point, they have been decent partners with the Urban Jobs Task Force in the city of Syracuse. So we are now meeting regularly to try to see what the parameters of that application is going to be, and we're working on that together. So Urban Jobs Task Force is trusting that what comes out of this process will be good, but it's really important that up until September 14th that people really harp on that and let the DOT know that they want local hire on the project, because that's only going to support us. And we're looking for a final draft date for that SEP 14 application to be done by the end of September. So it's actually perfect and timely. So yeah, please harp on that at that time. And this is going to be a way for the DOT to make sure that they prevent causing new economic and racial injustices from occurring as they did with the first I-81 project. I also just want to throw out there that the DOT, I believe, is going to be paying special attention to comments that include 3 kind of themes. Just 1, things that are in the DEIS. 2, how the project will likely affect the person who is submitting the comment. And 3, how the project will likely affect vulnerable residents who you, as the author of that comment, are concerned about, right? So just want to kind of make sure I throw out that importance. And then I also just want to say that if anybody would like the Liberties Task Force has created a guide, a kind of sample comments that people can submit and kind of a guideline for you to put together your comments. So if you would like access to that, you can email us and I will drop the email here in the chat. The final thing I wanted to share is tomorrow, we would love to have people show up and also just share that we are going to have a March for Justice for I-81s. We're going to go through the environmental justice community and in at the state office building with a press conference where there will be speakers, me, Lanessa, affected parents, affected kids in the environmental justice community, local workers who would like a job on the project. So it's really a community-based event. There are no politicians involved. This is really, it's all about community impact. And as of right now, that event is sponsored by 23 local organizations. So we did a good amount of organizing around that and got a good amount of community support. So we hope that you can show up and support that tomorrow at 10:30. We're meeting at MLK for the march. If you can't meet us for that, you can also join us at 12 o'clock for the brief press conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deka, for a very insightful presentation on the issues and the process that needs to happen going forward here. Lanessa, are you ready?
All right, I'm ready. So yeah, thank you. And obviously I echo everything that Deka has said. We've been working really hard over the past few years to kind of make sure we talk with one voice. So yeah, I think I'll just start a little bit from the first draft environmental impact statement and some of the issues and areas that community members along with the NYCOU and Urban Jobs Task Force had uplifted about what was problematic with the first draft. And I will say, as a very base starting point, I think it's very clear to at least our organization, based on our independent research, that the community grid is the best option, and it is also the first step in the right direction to achieve what we've been concerned about, which is racial justice, civil liberties, and civil rights. So I'll just start with that very kind of basic frontline. Although we do see problems with the current plan, we still believe that the preferred option is the best option. And so in the original draft environmental impact statement, some of the concerns that we raised was obviously the amount of traffic that will be going through the community under the community grid plan of 2019. And I will say that we reviewed the new draft, and we do have a projected major win on that impact, by in which they added an on and off ramp at Colvin Street that will direct about 30,000 cars outside of that community. And when I talk about that community, in case you don't know, the community that we've been kind of canvassing and knocking on doors and holding weekly workshops is the Southside community that lives adjacent to the viaduct. So our focus was primarily on the people who will be impacted by the demolition of the viaduct by mere fact that they live just a stone throw away from the highway. This is also the same community that was razed and demolished during the original build. So just making sure, and also have suffered from the consequences of living in such close proximity to a major roadway. So that's been our focus, and the term for that, I'm sure everyone here knows, is environmental justice. And basically what that term means is, if you are a community that's marginalized, which typically means a community that's low income, a community that's rural, or a community that's of color, historically, they have bared the brunt of pollution to benefit suburban, typically white communities. And so we identify that as an environmental justice issue, where we recognize that that community alone, they have a ton of brownfields in their neighborhood existing already. They have the steam plant, and they have this major roadway, all contributing to the negative impact to their health. And so this is the area that we've been focused on for the tenure, 3 years as I've been here, 1 year before I even arrived. And so we did a lot of advocating around how can we make this community that has been impacted by the viaduct a better community as a result of the community grid. And so making sure that the benefits of this plan is distributed equally through the region. And again, this community is not left out. And so one of the areas that we had of concern was that there was going to be too many cars driving through this viaduct. And I think one of the major wins, we submitted comments at the last go around, and I'm sure hundreds of other people did because they received over 2,000 comments in 2019, was to create an interchange at Colvin Street. And so this current plan has done that. So I just want to kind of point that out, that there will be that new interchange if you haven't seen the video already. One of our other major concerns around the project that we saw some movement in was we were really concerned with the fact that they were going to create Wilson Park as a staging site. So under the 2019 DEIS, they had proposed making Wilson Park a staging site as an ideal location, obviously, because that's where they're going to be doing the demolition. And why that was a concern to us is because obviously this is the community's only park. The optics of having a construction site siting in the middle of a community is just atrocious, and also the basic safety and health concerns. And so as a result, they did change that in the current plan, and they're going to instead create a 20-foot buffer. So they're going to build a fence around 20 feet of the park just to make sure that kids and other folks can have access to the construction during the construction, but they're not going to be siting any equipment there. So that was another major change in the draft environmental impact statement that I think a lot of the comments that were put in by the public helped push that along. I think the other major, I'll say major projected win was we had a lot of conversations with the DOT after the 2019 DEIS about their assessment and survey of noise walls. And prior to this year, the policy was they kind of asked individuals if they want a noise wall or not, and then they wait to see if the majority rules, and then they build the noise walls. Our problem with that was they really weren't putting into context what noise pollution actually does to folks and how it impacts your health. And so a lot of the conversations were, do you want a noise wall? And they had a picture of a concrete wall. So that just wasn't adequate to us. And as a result of, I think, of that pushback from community members and organizations like Nightclub, they have now actually changed their policy to, if you live in a community where there is noise pollution, meaning that your area has higher than the federally regulated noise pollution, they're going to install noise walls. Obviously, you'll have an option of what they want to look like, or unless you come out and verbally say that you don't want one. And I think finally, our other major concern was air quality. And this I guess part of the win is less cars will be in the community, but a major point of contention for us. Oh, before I get to that, I'll talk about another major win. And so we had a big concern about the future land use of the developable land. If you're not familiar, I assume you will, because we've had this conversation 100 times by now, but there will be some land that becomes available when the viaduct comes down. And so a lot of the conversation has been around, well, what are we going to do with this land once it becomes available? We've seen in other places that when the land becomes available, just like our neighbors in Rochester, it really becomes a hot spot for real estate. So developers, because it's in the city center and also so close to the Syracuse, to the educational institutions and the medical institutions, that there's always this fear that they're going to immediately try to take that land. And so we were thinking, we're really concerned with the future land use. Typically, when big developers come in and create commercial businesses, the value of the land goes up, which is a plus for our city. However, if there aren't safety measures put in place for residents who own home there, they won't be able to afford their property taxes anymore, because they could potentially triple in 12 months. And so making sure folks who are limited income, making sure folks who are on low income can still maintain the value of their property, but also making sure that during this new redevelopment of the business loop, rents are not raised, inflation of rent, so folks are displaced. I think the big difference between the original build and this potential loss is that the original build, we just saw 500 homes and businesses disappear within a matter of months. But this will kind of be more like a slow leak, where landlords will kind of start raising their rent month by month, and we'll start to see a neighborhood that the community can no longer afford to live in because it's now developed into a fancy business loop. And so one of our major concerns were what are we going to do to make sure that the residents who live there are not priced out by construction and development? And so the key points there were, one, let's look at Syracuse's rezone, which is their comprehensive zoning plan, and make sure the protections are in place on the zoning plan, which we submitted comments to them on the things that we'd like to see change in the zoning plan. But also, let's kind of hold the DOT accountable and saying that you should be creating some type of contingency plan when you're transferring the land back to Syracuse. So I'll say one of the major wins is they understood that argument, and they are creating a land use working group for the 4.7 acres of land in this current plan, which is a huge difference from the 2019 plan, where they were saying that the city trends had this land ideal for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, which was a real red flag for community members who typically in that community have larger families and would not be able to take advantage of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. So I kind of went over like some of the projected wins that we saw in the new draft, just to kind of highlight the DOT is listening to us. They are taking our comments seriously. So I would highly encourage you to submit comments if you can. I'm going to put a link in the chat that will take you directly to the NYCLU's page, and you can submit comments through there. I think why that is important, because if you submit comments through the NYCLU page, we have comments that auto-populate that talk about the issues that I'm talking about right now. You can always go in there and delete and edit and change, but at least that language will be there if you would like to use it. So what I will say is there are 2 major focuses on this new reiteration of the plan that we are concerned about, which I think is a strong point of contention between the NYCLU and the DOT, and that's currently where they're placing the roundabout. So we put a lot of comments and a lot of effort in to demonstrate why an on and off ramp or access ramp less than 600 feet away from a school is not ideal. First, I'll just start with the Environmental Protection Agency. Since 2011 has been saying that major roadways should be at least 500 to 600 feet away from a school. And also the CDC has been saying the same for almost a decade. And so looking at those recommendations and best practices and best policies, also 7 states currently prohibit building major roadways within 500 to 600 feet of a school, and 32 other states regulate that behavior. Unfortunately, New York is not one of the states that regulate that behavior. We actually do very little around environmental justice, shockingly. There's a school right now in the Bronx that's being built on a Superfund site, which just means that there's chemicals in the soil that are forever chemicals. So we don't do a lot of protecting our children when it comes to major toxins. So we've been advocating for the DOT to move that roundabout at least 600 feet away from the school. We know that if you live in close proximity to a major roadway, especially children who attend school there, their lungs are still developing. So there's a lot of issues around asthma, exacerbated asthma, other respiratory diseases and illnesses, lower cognitive abilities, which means they perform lower on tests, harder to concentrate. So there's a lot of things that will impact the child's ability to learn if they live so close to a major roadway. And then obviously just the optics of having this major roundabout just across the street from the school is very problematic. And so we would like them to figure out a way to move it, downsize it, and or the other option, which is not our favorite option, but it is an option, is to mitigate the school, which means essentially outfit the school to clean the air. Think about the type of air quality that a hospital has. They have a high-tech air ventilation system, which they call MERV 16s. So basically outfit the school with a MERV 16, which will clean the air before it actually reaches the building. Also closing the building envelopes, which means sealing up any cracks in the walls that allow air in, and then creating noise insulation in the walls to prevent all of the noise. So there are things you could do to the school. That doesn't include moving the roundabout, and that is our unfavorite second option. We would really like them to move the on and off ramp. And just clearly, it's just a hazard and danger. Roundabouts are ideal in certain circumstances. They actually have proven to calm traffic. So they do have a lot of benefits to them. We're not saying they don't, but we think that the optics of this and the children's health far outweigh the benefits of having a roundabout there. And then the other issue that we currently have with the DEIS is we're still waiting for that comprehensive environmental justice analysis. And basically what that means is we want the DOT to take a community survey to figure out the health of the community. So right now they're saying that no one in that area will be impacted by construction. But we want them to really take a look at what are the condition of the people who live there, folks who have respiratory disease, our most vulnerable population, which are the children and the older residents. Do they want to live through a construction project that may take up to 5 years? And if not, let's create a relocation plan for them so they can live comfortably and not have to worry about the pollution that will come during construction. I think it's very normal that pollution will increase during construction. Well, very well known that pollution will increase during construction. However, it's temporary, so the community grid is still the best option, but it is going to be a temporary increase, and folks who have already been living in such an environmentally injustice community, which means it's overburdened with pollutants now, we want to make sure they have the option to move out in doing so. And that's it for me, and I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any questions about.
Yeah, let's move on, and we want to hear from Sharon, and then we'll have an opportunity after that to entertain questions from our audience and questions and discussion between the panelists. Also, I will do after we hear from Sharon. So Sharon, can you unmute yourself and talk to us, please?
Hi, I don't have much to say. You've heard from some amazing community stakeholders. What this body of individuals should know is that while DOT, the federal government, are taking the responsibility for what will be transformational for our community, which will correct some paramount injustices that happened, particularly to the neighborhoods where the viaduct was erected. You have heard from the voices, representatives of the voices, not just voices, but strategically organized, detailed, data-oriented, organized individuals, whether that be Jonathan for the stakeholders on the north side of the viaduct, Bob Haley and his team talking about the actual development and land use and configuration of the highway. Lanessa and her team have been on the ground pre-COVID in the snow all over, talking to the residents in that neighborhood to make sure they're informed about what's going on. And last but certainly not least, the Urban Jobs Task Force, who is leaning into the workforce investment in that project for the entire city of Syracuse. These voices, the city is right in line with them. What they're pointing out to you are in the city's best interest. The city government is working with them. I just left a meeting to come to this meeting with members of our workforce development working group out of the big table. Aggie Lane from Deka's group is in that room. And so we are lined up, arms linked around these various topics. I can't even tell you how proud I am of our community stakeholders. City government is lining up to do what's in the best interest of its residents and its stakeholders, but it has been these community stakeholders, these folks who have many of them other day jobs, as well as what they've been putting forth and all the effort they put in for this 81 project. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to let you hear from them, but I just want to let you know that this panel is outstanding. They're stellar advocates for the community, and their efforts have been just excellent as a model for any other community that wants to know how its community can organize and come together around a paramount project like this. Thank you all. Can I jump
thank
in
you.
here John, can I jump in?
Thank you very much, Sharon. Sure.
So I wanted to call everyone's attention to the chat box, and there's some important information in the chat box. There's links. And as I'm sitting here listening, I'm hearing really important information, and I know I'm going to forget 3/4 of it. I want to invite the panelists to send me a list of bullet points of what you believe are the most important issues, because people signed up for this because they want to understand how to comment and what to comment about. So if you want to send me a list of bullet points, if you want to send me the websites, I see Lanessa has posted a couple of links there in the chat box, because what happens is I will post this recording up on YouTube,
And then I send an email to everyone who registered. So there's, double this number who actually registered. And everyone will, because they expressed interest in this topic, everyone will get that information whether they attended or not. So once again, inviting all of the panelists to send us their information. And I see Ashley Kang also invited letters to the editor for my South Side, and I will include that in the email to everyone who registered as well, because this is one of the most important issues for this community that we've seen in a really long time. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. And I just want to say, before I turn it back over to our panelists and to discussion, thanks to the panelists and for Sharon pointing out that we do have a stellar panel here. And I want to shout out to Barry Lentz, who assisted GreeningUSA in organizing this panel. So Barry couldn't be with us today because of an important family trip. And took him out of town, and he deserves that time off to be with his family. We all need to take that time. It helps to rejuvenate us, right? But I want to be sure I don't forget to thank Barry for his help in pulling you all together on this topic. Now, let's just quickly, I would say to our audience, if you have a question, to either post the word question or Q in the chat with your name so I can call on you, and or write your question in this chat, but you don't need to do that if you prefer not to write it out. And while that is happening, I would like to just take the opportunity to go back around through the panel to see if there are some comments that may have been triggered in your mind hearing your other panelists speak. So going back in the order that we started, and certainly if you don't have anything, that's fine at this point. Just say you're good and we'll pass on to the next one. This will be kind of like a lightning round with the panelists. Anything new or something else that you feel should be added that wasn't or that needs to be clarified. Greg Lowe was our initial speaker. Greg, is there something else you want to add here?
Highlight the community grid is good, but it can be made better with the input you've heard today.
Thank you. Jonathan?
I was just going to say the exact same thing that Greg said. We've got the community grid now. Now it's about getting all the details right and continuing to push on that. And everything that folks have said today is critical to that.
Okay. Bob Haley?
Sorry, I almost had an unmiked moment. Yes, following everybody's comments, I have 4 very short, specific comments regarding noise walls and other issues. If we reduce this, I always look to going to the problem, not to the solution first. Noise walls are a solution that have not yet defined the problem, as has been said clearly by Lanessa. So if you reduce the speed on these sections, I don't care where the sections are, but usually they're in residential or downtown neighborhoods, you will reduce the need for noise walls. So again, if we can get the DOT to reduce certain of their high speed standards in critical areas, that would be very important. Secondly, the combined land use between the South Side regarding land uses. The issues that are at concern here between University Hill, maybe, and the South Side, okay, we can do through the city managed planning concepts for relationships for lifting the residents and the businesses in both areas without one suffering from the other. That's really something that can be done through planning and visioning. Next comment. I'm sorry, I can't even read my own note here. Which is to grow the residential businesses in the land use areas, in the community areas that we want to do it. And Blueprint 15 is doing this. They're working on this now. So there's many things in play that, again, our communities ahead of other communities that we need to make just simply help lift each other. Regarding the roundabouts, moving the roundabout, that's to reduce the speed issue again. Consider removing it or reducing the speed, which the DOT has done. They put a safe element, a safe traffic mitigating element in the roundabout, and it would be better if there was more distance. So let's start thinking about how to address that equitably to certainly the problem. And reduce the road classification. It's not mentioned here, but they've called this section a business loop, BL81. And we've asked them if that requires the largest trucks to travel on that and the speeds. We've not gotten clear answers, but if the business loop name does raise the speed or the time of travel or the size of the trucks, then we should ask for that to be reduced to the next level, which is simply taking 12-foot lanes and making them 11, and you can still put the same trucks on, but it doesn't have that high commerce, highway designation through downtown and residential neighborhoods. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Deka, did you have something to add?
Nothing too much, just to harp on local jobs. And I also think it's really important the reason why I shared with you all the specific things that we wanted as far as goals is because the original SEP 14 application that the DOT submitted for I-81 defined local as countywide. And that's not what we're looking for here. So we have to be very clear when we go to the comment period that we're looking for a pro-Syracuse version of local hiring goals. So I think that's important, and of course, monitoring and public transparency. And I just want to answer the question because somebody has a question in here, Katharina. She said, can the presenters discuss education and training efforts to build a workforce for construction and other jobs related to the redesign of I-81, particularly for underrepresented minorities? I will just go ahead and share. No, we don't have the level of training that we need. And part of the reason for that is right, the funding and the prioritization of that training, right? So DOT could have then started training people for I-81. They knew that this was going to happen a long time ago. On a local level, we could have been using our political power to pressure them to train people 3 years ago, at least 2 years ago, when the Urban Jobs Taskforce released the REIS. But we're not there. But one thing that we do have is the Mayor's Initiative, which is a Syracuse Build. It's a pre-construction training program. It's meant to get people on jobs for I-81 and beyond in construction careers. They've started their first training class of 20. They just put out applications for the next 20. And then I know they're going to do 20 more before the year is up. So that's going to train 60 new people. But in the meantime, Syracuse Build, as well as Urban Jobs Task Force and Center State CEO, are all working together to try to have it was like a database of like who we have available, because we actually do have a lot of minority or underrepresented individuals with at least some training. So they're going to come into Syracuse Build at different levels. So it's important that we either give more money to that initiative, that the DOT starts on a job training program, or that we're able to ramp up efforts and access of stuff like OC and BOCES or SUNY EOC. So we do have a couple of things in place, but they need to be better. And then I would just say, as far as like community desire, because I've also heard like, well, do people want to work in construction? Like, does anybody actually want to work in these jobs? You know, safety, and it's cold and it's hot and it's extreme. I don't understand what the comments are for, because every job comes along with something. But I will say, yes, absolutely, people in the city are ready and willing to work on this project. The first set of, or I guess the first time the Syracuse Build applications went out, they got I think over 450 applications for 20 slots, and 367 of those individuals were city residents, and they are being prioritized for Syracuse Build. So hope that answers it. I don't know if Sharon or Greg wants to add anything to that, but.
Yeah, I'll just add, because I saw a couple other questions. So Syracuse Build was a creation of the mayor's administration in collaboration with Center State CEO and our partners at CMY Works EOC. We have a director. I'm going to put his email in the chat. Chris Montgomery is the director now. He is taking the helm on the workforce we're doing. Pathways to apprenticeship was the core that Deka is talking about. What is different about Pathways that we've haven't had any other time is that the actual instructors in the program are the union are from the union halls. We have 5 union hall partners right now. That has never happened in this community. So we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're going to keep pushing the envelope. We definitely need to double and triple down on how fast and how many people we're getting training, because at this rate, it's not going to, yes, and they are paid while they're being trained. And so we need to, now we're in the process of figuring out how we can actually double and triple down on the number of people that we're getting training, because as Deka mentioned, we are kind of behind the 8 ball because it should have been started years ago.
Thank you. I'll call on Lanessa. Lanessa, do you have something to add?
So the only thing I'll add is, I guess, our shameless plug, right? So we are, Deka mentioned it earlier, we are having a march, which we're calling Justice for I-81, with three pillars to it. So environmental justice, give us clean air; racial justice, return the land; economic justice, give us jobs. We have T-shirts made and signs made, and so if you want to participate, it starts at 10:30 a.m. at STEAM at Dr. King, which is 416 East Rainer Ave, and we're going to have some speakers at every stop. Impacted people. We have a student that's going to be talking about her experience going to school near a major roadway, and then we're going to stop at 333 East Washington, which is the state office building where the DOT's offices are, and we'll have a press conference at noon. So if you cannot make the actual march, please attend the press conference at noon. And all the speakers who spoke during the march will speak again, so you will be able to hear their stories and their narratives to really understand the community's impact and voice around this project. My last plug is we have virtual, we have two Tuesdays at 2 p.m. virtual talks with the NYCLU. If you're interested in that, I will send you our I-81 organizer, David Rufus's email, and you can just sign up for those links. And we have now in-person, socially distanced, face mask wearing meetings every Thursday from 6 to 7 at Dunbar Center. All of our meetings are in the footprint of the community, and that's intentional. We want to make it as easily as accessible. Yep, and there goes the flyer from the deputy mayor. We want to make it, and Greg Lowe is at every meeting. We just want to make sure that we make it as accessible to community members as possible. And if they have any questions for the city administration or anyone who comes to our meetings, they're available to answer those questions.
Thanks, Lanessa. Can you tell me again, where is the press conference at noon tomorrow?
The press conference will be at
I just posted the flyer in the link.
Oh, okay, so it's all the details about that is in the link there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Check the
Sharon,
link, make sure it's right.
Okay, Sharon, did you want to say anything else here?
No, thank you.
You're good. So, I think we've caught up with any of the questions that were added in the chat so far. Maybe we've missed something, but I would like to give the audience an opportunity to raise questions. And so however you choose to try to get my attention, if worst case scenario, unmute your mic. I see Peter Sirer waving and has unmuted his mic. So Peter, go for it.
Well, I think the discussion around the roundabout at Martin Luther King East is a very important one to have. Tactically, though, I'm wondering, unless we offer some specific alternative and agree to that alternative about moving things south, that the DOT is going to be much more able to kind of brush aside alternatives. In other words, if we're talking about Kennedy, or we're talking about Colvin, or if we're talking about Brighton, the DOT is going to say, well, we haven't got time to study all those alternatives. So I'm suggesting, even if it's not the ideal alternative, that there might be some consensus formed around what suggested alternative to the roundabout at Colvin. And as has been said, the roundabout is better than a traffic light. And with regard to that, I'm not sure everyone is clear that what currently exists in terms of Renwick, which is now a way to go under 81, is going to be eliminated, so that there isn't going to be access in that immediate area to the university as there is now. And in fact, you need to go 3 or 4 blocks north to Van Buren before there's any apparent linkage. So it appears as though there's a problem north as well as south. North meaning that reconnecting the community just isn't going to happen if the community means the south side and the university, which dominates everything on the east side of what is going to be the business loop 81. So I've got 2 questions, I guess, one having to do with south and the other having to do with north.
Anybody want to take a shot at that, Peter's comment?
Well, just for the discussion, it's, I think what's critical here is to really understand what the community thinks. There's been comments already about how close this intersection, whether it's traffic light or a roundabout, is too close to MLK. That discussion is not fully completed. And one of the options is to move it. So that should be asked in that way. Secondly, they should test it. Again, my initial response for us all today, and even though we don't believe it, this is a draft of a draft, and we're asking for community input. This is the time to reprogram the final solution. And I say that positively, get the DOT to test it, see what the results are, get more community input. I'm frustrated, as I have been through this entire process, by the fact that they're doing their work and they're doing it very well, and it's very complicated. And yet it's set up not to do a fully kind of engaged rethink. And it's because of scheduling and time. There's so many critical and hard issues. We should be able to get, and the DOT is listening, we should be able to, this response period, get these key issues raised up really quickly and address them. It's interesting here too, there are different groups. Greg, you talked about your engineering and engineering teams in City Hall. Others of us may not know what they're suggesting. These dialogues are critical because they may be misrepresenting some community inputs. Okay, that's all. Down that one.
Yeah, that's a good response, Bob. And I guess since it is a complicated, some design questions here, I guess important for the community submitting comments is to say that there are questions about this thing, and it needs to be worked out with the community's input, realizing that this is this is complicated, and we expect it to be resolved in an appropriate manner, I guess. Assuming we can't make comments that are specific, to the point, we at least got to raise the questions, I imagine, in our comments to the DOT. Does anybody else want to respond to Peter's concern?
I missed a part of the question about the roundabout because I had to take a call really quick, but I would love to hear the question again.
I think Peter's concern was one about whether that we should come to some sort of a community consensus, perhaps, about where the best place for that roundabout is, and not to overlook the other connections to the community in that part of the project, with the connections to the university that may or may not be eliminated that exists today. Did I paraphrase that correct, Peter?
Close enough. Close enough.
Okay,
John,
so yeah,
I'll
I
just
guess
say to
my
the group,
my response would be, I would exactly. I would first question the idea of needing a consensus of where the roundabout would be, specifically because the community members who live in that community have been very, very boisterous and saying they just simply don't want a roundabout 150 feet away from their children's school. So I think that voice needs to be elevated. The same way, if in your community you said you didn't want something, right, your voice should take precedent because you're in that community. And a lot of these folks have been there for generations and they're tied to that community, and their kids go to school there. And so the optics of having a roundabout that's going to carry 36,000 cars per day, just 100 feet across the street from their child's school is not ideal, right? I don't think anyone I hope no one on this, at least this go-to meeting would think that that is a good idea. Now, I don't have a solution on where the roundabout should go because I'm not an engineer. I have heard the justifications of why it needs to be there from the DOT, and I can share that with you. One of the justifications is it's hard to move it any further because it goes up against the railroads and they can't move the railroads. And then the other suggestion was, they also did admit in our meeting that it's not as small as it could be. Something that I think we've all heard before, I think maybe even Bob might have said it on this call, that a diet highway, like yes, they agree they could absolutely make it smaller. But one of the reasons why they went for the 12-foot roundabout is because 18-wheelers will be using the roundabout, which also is another level of concern when you're talking about being so close to a school. Finally, if we think about the greenery in the area and the lack thereof, right? This isn't a suburban community, it's an urban dense community where there aren't many spaces to play. The current design of the roundabout has a green patch of grass in the middle of it, which also could be enticing to children to try to access that green patch of grass, whether they want to play tag or play ball or just roll around in the grass, right? We're not talking about a community that has large front and backyards or have a lot of greenery, even at their park. And so just thinking ideally how the design of the roundabout is, the placement of the roundabout, it just needs, in our opinion, it just needs to move. Also, notwithstanding, we understand the benefits of a roundabout, generally speaking, that doesn't make it appropriate for every design plan. And I think considering what the voice of the community has said, the parents have said, and our own independent research, it just doesn't seem like that's the best place for it. And so I don't know, I wouldn't say we need to come to a consensus within any group. I think that our job is to support the community, listen to what they're saying and help elevate their voice. I think going into this, even with my own ideology that the community grid was the best option, if the community that I serve would have said, no, we want to keep the highway, we would be having a very different conversation, because it's not about me and putting what I feel or what I think, even though on a climate justice and environmental justice very bare bones level, like getting major highways out of communities, no doubt, is like the first step of kind of ameliorating some of the harm that's happening in the past. But it's really, that really wasn't our goal. Our goal was to listen and learn and then elevate their voice.
John, if I could quickly say, and Lanessa, excellent input about the concerns of the community. I just want to add, Peter, you heard yesterday from the mayor, not everyone on the call did, that Mayor Walsh addressed this issue with the Commissioner of Transportation yesterday. This is absolutely on the city's radar as a critical concern of the city. And the mayor will hold the DOT accountable to better solutions to address that location. I am not a spokesperson for the DOT here, but there is one explanation that the DOT has provided that people might be wondering about that is worth noting, is the notion of moving the roundabout further south, which seems to be a logical solution, and in fact should be absolutely evaluated. The concern raised by DOT is that that could create the situation of the need for a signaled intersection at Martin Luther King Boulevard in order to accommodate turns onto Martin Luther King Boulevard. That's their notion today. A signaled intersection does have safety drawbacks. We have to look really closely at how we address the size of this roundabout, the location of the roundabout, both north, south, and easterly directions. So all three of those.
Yeah, I think it does need to be studied, Greg. And all I wanted to say there was, believe it or not, we really just started this hard look at this, even though it's came as a new to us. The street options for bus traffic around the school all are critical to this. And certainly if traffic, we don't want 2 traffic intersections possible. You need to just look at all of this and balance it. There probably is a good answer in there.
Sure. And as Bob, you pointed out earlier, this is a draft a draft design report, I guess. So,
Thank you, John.
So a lot of work left to be done on it. I do like the suggestion that Lanessa raised about doing some mitigation at the school. Maybe not necessarily to leave the roundabout there, but maybe in addition to moving the roundabout, because this whole air quality situation indoors is coming under a whole different light as we got ourselves into this pandemic. And so wouldn't it be interesting if we could do a pilot project on creating a better air quality situation in our schools? But that's a topic for another day. We are close to running out of time here. Are there any other questions or comments that people in the audience would like to raise? I don't see anybody waving, putting up signals, or putting anything in the chat. Going once. I'll remind everybody, the video of the presentations will be available shortly. I think Diane usually does a great job of getting it out in a couple of days. So look forward if you want to review some of the information here. Going twice. Thank you to our panelists for being with us today. It was a fantastic presentation. I appreciate all your commitments to this project and to your support of GreeningUSA's efforts to be part of the dialogue on this. And I again recognize Barry for his help in putting this all together. So Diane, I think we're done. I don't think I see Peter King put something in here. Air quality in general is a topic worth focusing on. Yes, thank you very much for that. I think we're done for today. Do you have anything you want to add before we close out, Diane?
Nope, just thank you to everyone for taking the time, and panelists, don't forget to send me information that you would like me to forward when I send the link for the recording.
All right, well, everybody have a great weekend. Look forward to a big turnout at tomorrow's event. Yeah, I probably